بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلوات الله وسلامه على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد المصطفى وعلى آله ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. وأما بعد, this is lesson number one after the introduction of the book علم النحو والصرف. After the introduction to the book علم النحو والصرف, this is lesson number one, which I have labeled as N001, الكلام وأقسام الكلمات. الكلام is speech, and أقسام الكلمات are parts of speech. So first, let's look at what is speech, or al-kalam, as defined by the grammarian in Arabic grammar. It is defined as لفظ مفيد. For example, Al-Imam ibn Malik in his Alfiya of Ilm al-Nahw al-Sarf, he said, كلامنا لفظ مفيد كاستقم. That كلامنا, our speech, or speech from our perspective, and by our here, na, يمين النحاة. كلامنا أي الكلام عند النحاة أو كلام النحاة. That speech from the perspective of the grammarians is lafdun, that first it must be uttered, lafdun, and mufidun mean it must be beneficial. That's the definition of speech عند النحاة. I want to highlight four points from this this definition. Number one is that this is defined. This is the definition of speech according to grammar and not according to other disciplines of knowledge. For example, philosophers, they see it differently, that we consider speech communication by adding any means, whether it's lafzun, whether it's qawlun, whether it's uttered or not. Number two is that it must be uttered. If someone has a thought within his mind but does not articulate that thought verbally or in writing, then with the grammarian, it is not considered speech. With a philosopher, for instance, it is. Number three, it must be meaningful or literally beneficial, mufid. It must carry a full message conveyed by one of the two kinds of sentences. The nominal sentence, al-jumlatul ismiya, or the verbal sentence, al-jumlatul fi'aliyah. If someone says a word that is not a part of a sentence, then with the grammarian it is not speech, whereas with the philosopher it is considered speech. For instance, let's say a person were to just show up right now and they said, Khalid. They just said Khalid. Did they speak? Of course they spoke. We heard them speak. We heard them say Khalid. But with the grammarian, it is not a meaningful sentence. It would only be a meaningful sentence, say, for instance, if you were to ask, who came? And then the person said Khalid. But what he meant, which is what is understood, is Ja'a Khalid. Ja'a Khalidun. But if the person were to just say Khalid in no context, nothing, jump out of their sleep, is dreaming, for instance, we don't consider that speech in the Arabic language because it's not a full, meaningful sentence. Just to give you an introduction of these two kinds of sentences, the nominal sentence, I'll read that phrase for you. Al-jumlatu lismiyatu. Al-jumlatu lismiyatu. Al-jumlatu lismiyah, the nominal sentence. The reason why we say lismiyah and we don't say ismiyah is because the hamza, or al-hamzatani, hamzat al-wasl, that the two hamza, the one before the word al, in adat ta'rif, in the definite article, that's hamzatul wasl, and the one in ism, the hamza in ism, is also hamzatul wasl. So therefore, what would happen is that the kasra from ism would be transmitted to the lam, and that hamza would be dropped. So we will say al-jumlatu lismiyatu. And of course, anyone who has memorized Surah Al-Hujurat properly and knows how to read with proper qira'ah and tajweed, you would say bi'sa lismul fusuqu ba'da al-iman. Al-jumlatul ismiya comprises of a mubtada, al-mubtada'u, which is the subject, and the predicate, which is al-khabaru, without a verb helping, without a verb or what is called a helping verb, as is in English. So in the English language, you must have a verb in a sentence for it to be considered a sentence. The word al-mubtada'u literally means the thing that you begin with, and the khabar, al-khabaru, literally means information about the subject. So the Arabic language is very simple. Start with something and tell me something about that something. Uh, so this is called al-isnad, isnadul kalimati ila kalima. And the khabar literally means information about the subject. The structure of the subject in Arabic is to start with the mentioning of something, then share some information about the thing. For instance, if I were to say al-kitabu jadidun, we would say al-kitabu is al-mubtada'u and jadidun is al-khabar. Al-kitabu is the word that I begin with or that was begun with al-mubtada'u. You just say al-kitab, the book, and then you told us something about the book. We found out that the book is new. So we know that this book is not an old book, it's a new book, for instance. So the expression or the sentence, al-kitabu jadidun, is comprised of two parts. The book is new, is how we would translate it into English. Of course, there is no word for is in the Arabic language, and there's no need for it. So whereas in the English language, we have to say the book is new, in the Arabic language, we pretty much said the book new. It's kind of like if you're Guyanese. In Guyana, we would say the book new. In fact, you probably say, man, the book new, man. Yeah, of course, in English, we have to utilize the helping verb as as there is not a sentence in English without a verb. So we will translate this al-kitabu jadidun as the book is new. So that's the nominal sentence, al-jumlatul ismiya, in the Arabic language. As for the verbal sentence, it is the verbal sentence comprises of al-fi'lu wal-fa'ilu. So that's a different kind of sentence. Al-fi'lu is the verb, al-fa'ilu is the subject. And that's the least, at least these two components must be present for you to have a verbal sentence. Al-fi'lu wal-fa'ilu. There must be an action or a verb and the actor, because there's no action without an actor. For every action that is performed, someone did it, someone or something. And of course, you may have a third component, perhaps fourth or fifth, is if the verb is intransitive. We call it fi'alun lazimun. If it's an intransitive verb, it would have only al-fi'lu wal-fa'il. But if it is a transitive verb, fi'alun muta'addin, then you must also have a maf'ulun bihi, an object, a recipient of the action. For example, if I were to say in English, or say first in Arabic language, and nama tiflu, literally slept the baby, slept the baby. Of course, in the English language, we would translate it as the baby slept, because we would always start with the subject before the verb. The original structure of the verbal sentence in Arabic is the verb and then the subject. So we put the verb and then we put the subject. That's the original structure. When we translate into English, we will mention the subject and then the verb. Even though this is necessary in English, this changes the meaning in Arabic. So if you were to say the baby slept in Arabic language, it doesn't have the same meaning as slept the baby. If you were to say al-tiflu nama, it is not the same meaning as saying nama al-tiflu. And this comes about from ilm al-balagha. This is a subtlety. The difference is that if we were to say nama al-tiflu, We are informing you that there is a baby and that that baby slept. But if we were to say الطفل نام, what we meant, the baby slept, not other than the baby. So for instance, if you wanted to communicate the idea that, hey, I'm lying in bed with my wife and we have a baby here, and we wanted to inform you that the baby slept, my wife didn't sleep, and I didn't fall asleep, we would say الطفل نام. The baby slept, meaning not other than the baby. But if I were to tell you نام الطفل, I would say the baby slept, or we translate it as the baby slept, but what it really means slept, the baby. I'm informing you that the baby is not awake, independent of whether we sleep or not. So if it is myself or my wife had fallen asleep, that message is not conveyed in that sentence نام الطفل. But if you were to say الطفل نام, it conveys that meaning, of course, based on the context. This subtle difference is extremely important in understanding Quran. Extremely important in understanding and translating Quran. These kinds of subtleties are the subject of the studies of al-balagha, expressions. Give you another example. For example, if we were to say in the Arabic language, شرب الولد الحليب, this is an example of a transitive verb. We have here shariba, meaning he drank. Al-waladu, that's the boy, the subject. Al-haliba, the object. Um, I'm not talking about the grammatical position of these words as yet. We will do that in a separate section. This literally means drank the boy the milk, but we would translate it as the boy drank the milk. To say the boy drank the milk in Arabic has an implication that is not intended. If you say sharib al waladul haliba and you translate it as the boy drank the milk, that is not what we said in Arabic. And a person would say, hey, but it's the best way we can translate it in English. I say, yes, it's the best way we can translate it in English. But the syntaxes of the two languages are different. And one ought to be very cautious, especially in the translation of Quran. So let me explain again. Just like with the baby slept or slept the baby, here, sharib al waladul haliba means drank the boy the milk. That's how we understood it in Arabic language. We understood that there's some drinking took place. The boy who is the one who did it, and he did it to the milk. But if you were to say al waladu sharib al haliba, the message that conveys is that the milk was drunk. Someone drank the milk, and we're telling you it's the boy that drank the milk, not other than the boy. So if I were to say al waladu sharib al haliba, what I meant is the boy drank the milk, not other than the boy. So as if the milk was drunk and you wanted to know who drank the milk, and I told you the boy drank the milk, not the girl, not the man, not the woman, not the cat. So that's the meaning of the boy drank the milk. Hence, us understanding or translating the boy drank the milk has a totally unintended consequence in the translation. So that briefly is an introduction to al-kalam عند النحاة with the grammarians, al-kalam or speech with the grammarians. As for the individual components that comprise speech, Al-Imam Ibn Malik said uh, in the chapter or in the section Al-Kalamu wa ma yata'allafu min, Al-Kalamu, speech, and what it is formed from, what it is comprised of, what constitutes kalam, meaning the individual components that make up kalam, is al-kalima. He says, كلامنا لفظ مفيد كاستقم واسم وفعل ثم حرف الكلم ويحيده كلمة والقول عم وكلمة بها كلام قد يؤم. That al-kalam is speech, and the individual components that comprise or make up speech are three components. What we call اسم أو الاسم فعل أو الفعل أو حرف الحرف. Whereas in the whereas in the English language we have 8 or 9 parts of speech, and there's some who claim more. In the Arabic language we only have 3 parts of speech, meaning every word, all words in the Arabic language must be categorized as either ism أو فعل or حرف. There is no word in the Arabic language that is not one of these three. So if you were to take an ayah in Quran, say for example, uh, uh, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and we were to say ba, we would say it's harf. Ism, it's ism. Uh, the word Allah, we say it's ism. The word Ar-Rahman, it's ism. The word Ar-Rahim, it's ism. If we were to say Iyaka na'budu, we would say Iyaka, that is ism. Uh, na'budu, we would say it's fi'l. So we have to identify each component in a sentence or in an ayah as being either ism, fi'l, or harf. Their approximate equivalent in the English language are fi'l, it's easy, they're verbs. For example, kataba. Kataba Allahu la aghlibanna ana wa rusuli. Allah has written. Kataba, he wrote. We say that's fi'lun. Harf, prepositions and conjunctions, for example, like fi and wa and fa and thumma, those are all huruf. Then the rest are asma. If you can identify verbs, which action words, and huruf, which are like prepositions and conjunctions, they're small words fixed, they don't change, then everything else would be asma. That would include nouns, adverbs, pronouns, and adjectives. All four of these are seen as ism or asma. The plural of ism is asma, the plural of fi'l is af'al, and the plural of harf is huruf. Those are the three parts of speech in the Arabic language. And because it would be repeated so much, you will get to know al-ism wal-fi'l wal-harf very, very well before this course is over. The definition or the definitions of each of these. تعريف الاسم, the definition of the ism. We say هو ما دل على معنى في نفسه وليس زمن جزءا من. It is something that within itself it carry a meaning, but time is not a part of it. So for instance, if I were to say Zaidun, Zaid is a proper name. It identifies an individual, but time has nothing to do with it. There's no time associated with the word. For example, فلما قضى زيد منها وطرا زوجناكها. Here in this ayah, I don't want to do analysis of the entire ayah. It's too much at this stage. But we'll say Zaid is فاعل. قضى is a verb. It's فعل. وزيد فاعل. And it's ism. ولد. For example, Allah says, فَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ وَلَدٌ وَوَرِثَهُ أَبَوَاهُ فَلِأُمِّهِ الثُّلُثُ. And if he does not have children and his parents, his two parents, inherited him, then his mother will get 1/3. This is in the chapter or in the section of inheritance in Surah Al-Nisa. ثَمَرٌ وَكَانَ لَهُ ثَمَرٌ. This is a part of the ayah in Surah Al-Kahf. And then he had fruits. Thamarun, fruits, it is an ism. It conveys the meaning of an object, but time is not associated with it. وشجرة تخرج من طور سيناء, and a tree that comes from the mountain of Sinai. Shajara is a tree. It identifies an object, but time is not a part of that. Uh, Further examples, for instance, so you'll understand stripping time from it. If we were to take a verb and form a noun from it, for example, if I were to take the verb, I'll give you a live example, shariba, which means he drank. Shariba, he means he drank. Okay, that word entails within it the meaning of time. See that he drank. It's telling us he drank, and he drank in the past. But if we were to take that verb shariba and we strip it of two things, one, إسناد الفعل إلى الفاعل, we remove the subject, that is he, and we also remove the time, the past. What we're left with is what we call ashurbu, ashurbu. أشرب. We left with the word ashurbu. And ashurbu is a noun. It means drinking. It's what we call the masdar or the source of the word. And it only conveys the action, not the actor, nor the time of the action. So whereas shariba is a verb and it contains the, the إسناد الفاعل إلى الفعل, the association of the actor to the verb, and also the time يعني فعل الفعل في الماضي أو الفعل في الماضي, that it was done in the past. The word shurb strips both of those two meanings from the word shariba, and all we're left with is the drinking. We know drinking is a ism, and that it took, and we don't know who did it, and we don't know when it was done. The moment you associate it to a doer, it becomes a verb, and then of course you will have to clarify whether it was done in the past or it was done in the present or in the future. So if you wanted to do isnad shurbi إلى رجل, تقول شرب الرجل if he did it in the past, or يشرب الرجل if he's doing it in the present, or will do it in the future. Also يشرب if he's going to do it in the future. That's the definition of al-ism. The definition of al-fi'al, we say تعريف الفعل هو ما دل على معنى في نفسه وزمن جزء منه. It is something that carries a meaning of its own, and time is a component, a part of that. Also, it has إسناد الفاعل أو الفعل إلى الفاعل, the association of the action to the actor, the doer. For example, أمثلة, Allah says in Quran, صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم, the path of those you have blessed. أنعمت, أنت أنعمت عليهم. أنعمت, we would say فعل ماض مبني على الفتحة, والفاعل الضمير المستتر تقديره أنت. We would say that أنعمت is a verb that is structured this way, built that way, it's fixed. Um, and the subject is a hidden pronoun, anta, you, understood from this ta, um, but the ta is actually a part of the verb. It is not the fa'il. An'amta is you blessed in the past. So here it conveys that this action of al-in'am, in'amullahi alayhim, waqa'a fil madi, that Allah blessing them occurred in the past. Because of the structure of the word, we know that the verb was done in the past. So therefore, time, az-zamanu juz'un min, is part of this word. Or, for example, in the ayah, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, we have two verbs here, نَعْبُدُ and نَسْتَعِينُ. These verbs tell us two things, that the actions are being done in the present or in the future, or continuously, present continuous. So na'budu mean we worship, nasta'in mean we ask for help. The fa'il is us, the believers, in both cases, and the actions are being done either in the present continuously or in the future, inshallah. Ihdi, ihdi is a command form of the verb, command from linguistic perspective, but of course, being respectful to Allah, we don't call here this fi'lul amri, we don't call it imperative form or command form of the verb. We humbly say it's fi'lul du'a, it's a request or a plea form of the verb. Ihdi means guide, na, us, as-sirata, the path, al-mustaqim, the upright. Guide us the upright path, literally, guide us to and along the upright path. It's a request that we make to Allah. Time is a component of that. We're saying from now on, from the time that I make this dua, forever, inshallah, we're pleading to Allah, we're requesting from Allah, we're making dua to Allah that He guide us. So time is a part of that word. تعريف الحرف, the definition of the harf هو ما دل على معنى غير مستقل بالفهم. So whereas the al-ism has a meaning of its own, معنى في نفسه, on its own, and the verb معنى في نفسه, it has a meaning of its own. الحرف, we say it دل على معنى غير مستقل بالفهم, that it doesn't have a meaning by itself. The word must be associated with something else for it to carry a meaning. For instance, if we say be, with what? You have to, with what, or because of, or with the aid of what. Uh, or like we say alhamdu lillahi, lam is harfu jarrin, lillahi, to. Alhamdulillah, all praises belong to Allah. Uh, if we were to just say li, the word li doesn't have a meaning by itself. It must be associated to the majroor, the word that comes after the preposition, for it to have a meaning. So ba by itself doesn't have a meaning. Lam by itself doesn't have a meaning. These are actually words. Ba, bi, lam, li, be, with, li, for. They don't have meanings on their own. They must be associated with another word or connected to another word uh, for them to have meaning. Signs. So now that we know these three parts of speech, what we want to do is have a brief idea how to identify these three parts of speech. When we see an ism, how do we know? Can we just look at it and know it's ism? And the answer is yes. There are certain identifications that are possible. I will share with you four of them for al-asma. There is a fifth that we call al-isnad, which I'll probably mention here, but I'll be explaining it in detail in other places, inshallah. So the first is al-jar. والاسم قد خصص بالجر, that the ism is the only word that will be majroor. And you will understand what a jar is in the next lesson, inshallah. So every word in the Arabic language has a grammatical state. So the word must either be mabni, it must be fixed, or it changes. And if it changes, there are four states. One of those states is called al-jar. Generally, the word has a kasra at the ending. That's what jar means. The other state is al-raf'u. Generally, it means it has a dhamma at the ending. And the third state is a nasb. Generally, that means it has a fatha at the ending of the word. And jazm, that's only for verbs. And that generally means that the verb, present tense verb, has a sukun at the ending. So by looking at the ending of the word, if the word has a kasra, we know the word is majroor, or very likely the word is majroor, and that would be a sign that it is ism. For example, when Allah says in Quran, Alhamdu lillahi rabbil alameen, and the word Allah here has a kasra at the end. Allah didn't say Allahu lillahu, he didn't say lillaha, he said lillahi. The fact that you're able to put a kasra at the ending of that word is a sign that that word is ism. It's in the part of speech that is classified as ism. And of course, we know that's the name of Allah in this case. Rabbi, the word Rabbi has a kasra at the ending, not Rabbu, not Rabba, Rabbi. And that kasra there at the ending of the word Rabbi is an indication that the word Rabb is ism. Also, the word al-alameen is ism, and it's majroor. It's majroor by what we call al-idafa, that it is the possessor. The al-mudaf ilayhi is the possessor. We'll study al-idafa, or possession, in its own time. And like I said, the sign of jar is mostly kasra. Here, the sign of jar is the ya, and we would learn that in its own time, inshallah. Another sign that a word is ism is if the word has tanween. For example, if we say kitabun, qalamun, or fi kitabin, or ra'aytu kitaban, bun, ban, bin, all of those tanween at the ending of the words are signs that they are asma. For example, Allah says in Quran, تِلْكَ عَشَرَةٌ كَامِلَةٌ. Allah is talking about fasting 10 days. If you were to join Umrah with Hajj, uh, do what we call Hajj at-Tamattu', then you have to either sacrifice, and if you cannot sacrifice, you have to fast 10 days. Uh, uh, 3 of them during Hajj and 7 when you return, and that makes 10 complete days. Allah says those are 10 complete days. The word asharatun because it has the tanween tun, and the word kamilatun because it has the tanween are indication that both the word asharatun and kamilatun are asma or isman. If the word has the definite article al in front of it, that's an indication that the word is um, is ism also. You never put al except in front of an ism. Uh, for example, Allah says, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ. We see the word as-salata has alif and lam, alatu ta'arifi. In front of it, that's an indication that the word as-salata is ism. Also, if you address something, that means the name of or title of someone, that's an indication that that's an ism. So the moment you see ya, whatever comes after it is ism. For example, Allah says in Quran, قال يا آدم أنبئهم بأسمائهم. When Allah addressed Adam alayhi salam and instructed him to inform the angels of the names of the things that were presented to them, Allah said, O Adam, inform them of their names, the names of the objects or the things. We say here the word Adamu is ism because it has harfun nida, ya come in front of it. It's munada. It has been addressed. You can only address an ism. You cannot address a fi'al or a harf. We also say al-isnad. That's a fifth one. I didn't write it down here because I'll explain it later. It's a little bit more technical. The association. So al-isnad is a sign that the word is ism. For example, when you have the mubtada and you have the khabar, isnadul khabari ila al-mubtada'i is a sign that the mubtada is ism. Anyway, I'll explain that in another section, inshallah. So these are signs of the word being ism. If the word is majroor, if it has kasra generally. If the word has tanween, if the word has alif and lam at the starting, if it's munada, if it has been addressed. Al-Imam Ibn Malik said, بالجر والتنوين والندى وال ومسند للاسم تمييز حصل. That you can identify the asma by these 5 components. 4 I listed here and 1 I will talk about later, inshallah. As for verbs, we have here also 4 ways of identifying or 4 signs of identifying verbs. دخول تاء التأنيث الساكنة عليه. For example, if you were to place this ta انفطرت نحو إذا السماء انفطرت. We see انفطرت, we know it's a verb because you put this open ta that indicates femininity of the verb. When the sky انفطرت splits open. وإذا الكواكب انتثرت, and when the planets just spread it out, actually they shatter and disintegrate. The word intatharat, we know it's verb because it has that open ta at the ending, ta ta'nith asakina. وإذا البحار فجرت, and when the seas or the oceans are fujirat, they explode and they flow over. We see the ta'nith al-maftuha, the ending is an indication that the word fujirat is a verb. وَإِذَا الْقُبُورُ بُعْثِرَتْ, and when the graves are opened up, or what is in the graves are extracted, resurrected. We know the word bu'athirat is a verb because of that ta. عَلِمَتْ نَفْسٌ مَا قَدَّمَتْ وَأَخَّرَتْ. Every soul will know what they sent forth and what they left behind. قَدَّمَتْ, we know it's a verb because of the ta. أَخَّرَتْ, we know it's a verb because of the ta. So that ta al-maftuha, qalat, ja'at, sharibat, أكلت, دخلت, أخرجت, صلت. That ta at the ending is a sign that the word is verb, فعل. Also, if you were to put the word قد in front of the word, قد is used to emphasize a verb, both present tense and past tense, and it has other meanings in present tense. But دخول قد عليه. So, for example, Allah says, قد سمع الله قول التي تجادلك في زوجها. Allah has heard the words of the one who disputes with you concerning her husband. There's a story that's associated with this in Surah Al-Mujadala. But anyway, the word sami'a, we know it's a verb because the word qad has been placed in front of it. Another sign is dukhulu sini alay, that the putting a sin, which is a short form of saying sawfa, sa, in front of a word is an indication that that word is a verb, and present tense verb at that also. Sin is only placed in front of present tense verb. For example, Allah says, كَلَّا سَوْفَ تَعْلَمُونَ ثُمَّ كَلَّا سَوْفَ تَعْلَمُونَ. By no means, then you shall know in the future. Then by no means, then you shall know. We know يَعْلَمُون is a verb because the sin is placed in front of it, which means will or shall in the future. And the same here. The same for دخول سوف. Saufa is the long form of the scene sa. Saufa is the full form of the word will. When that's in front of a word, we know that the word is a verb. كلا سوف تعلمون ثم كلا سوف تعلمون. علامات الحرف, the signs of the harf. Very simple. كل ما ليس باسم ولا فعل فهو حرف. Everything that is not an ism and not a fi'al, it's a harf. For example, حرف العطف واو in إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. حرف الجر صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم. علي is originally على, حرف جر. حرف جر في ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه in it. حرف جر من. ومما is originally من ما. ومما رزقناهم ينفقون, and of what we have provided them they spend. We know the word min is حرف جر. وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون. Min is حرف جر. This is kind of like a simplistic way of presenting this, saying ask yourself, is the word ism or is the word fi'al? And if the answer is no, then it's yes for harf, because remember, every word must be either ism, fi'al, or harf. But one way you can identify, they're generally very short, they're fixed, they don't change at the ending. حروف الجر كلها مبنية. All the huruf are mabniya, they don't really change at the ending because of grammar. They change for qira'ah, not grammar. For example, عليهم changed. It's originally ala, but we change it from an alif to a ya because of this, because the pronoun has been joined onto it. But عليهم was actually originally alahum. But علahum is kind of strange. So the Arabs say عليهم. They change the alif to a ya, and that happens a lot with what we call weak letters, حروف العلة. So this briefly is lesson number 1. To summarize that once again, we see the Arabic language, what kalam is, what speech is, what parts of speech are, and that the parts of speech are 3 parts of speech: al-ismu, wal-fi'lu, wal-harf. From these 3 kinds of words or categories of words, all kalam are comprised, are constituted, are made up. Every single ayah in Quran, every single sentence in every ayah or combination of verses uh, are comprised only of asma, af'al, and huruf. It must be one of those three. And that briefly is lesson number N001. وجزاكم الله خيرا.